here today to show you how to make mini quiches, and I'm going to focus first on pastry. But before I start, I just want you to know that I've tied my hair back, I'm wearing my apron, and I wash my hands before I start, or I'm going to start the process. I've gathered my ingredients together. I've got some butter, or you could use baking butter. I've got my plain flour, which is suitable for making pastry and biscuits, sauces, and I've got some water ready to go. So those are my main ingredients for making pastry. Over here, I've got all my equipment that I'm going to need. I've got a spoon, my palette knife, I've got my rolling pin, my baking tray, 12-hole baking tray, and I have my pastry cutter as well. I've got my big bowl, and because I'm on a scaffold table, which is a bit wobbly, I've actually just got a board today, so I've got a nice flat base for rolling pastry later. I'm going to organise myself now. I'm going to move everything away that I don't need, and it's all close at hand for later on, but I'm just going to focus on the 3 ingredients in front of me here. So I've got my starch, which is my plain flour, and I'm going to pour that into the bowl, and I've got my butter. Now, with my butter, I could put the whole of the butter into here, but if I've got to reduce this and make this into a crumbly texture, it will take me ages. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to chop my butter into small pieces, so it makes it much easier when I'm using the rubbing in method to actually create my golden breadcrumbs, which is the start of the pastry process. So chopping up really quickly, you're going to take your time. Notice I'm on a plate and I'm using a butter knife. And what I'm going to do, I'm just going to pop that into my bowl like that to move anything away that I don't need. Right, so hands in. If you put your hands to your face, you'll feel your palms of your hands are very warm, but your fingertips are a lot cooler, and you are using just your fingertips today. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to rub the butter into the flour using just my fingertips, and I'm using the rubbing in method. So it's going to take a little bit of time, but while I'm actually rubbing this in, I'm going to tell you what's happening. So as I'm rubbing the flour into the butter, what's happening? The butter is being absorbed into the flour, and it's shortening and creating little air pockets between the butter coated flour particles. So notice I'm using exactly the same technique as we use when we make crumble, and we made Dorset shortbread this year with Year 7s and Year 8s. If you're following this again, just a little review on all the techniques we used when we made jam tarts, and some of you were able to make Cornish pasties and chocolate tarts with fruit. Now what I'm going to do, I'm actually going to use the judder test, so you can see that the golden breadcrumb texture is starting to form, and there are larger pieces of butter in there, so I'm going to give it the judder test. And what it's doing, it's bringing all the larger pieces of fat to the surface. So I'm just going to work on those. I'm trying just to use the tips of my finger because I want that golden crumb texture, because I want to have lovely crisp light pastry. think we're nearly there now. Quick little judder. There we go. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next stage. I'm going to start adding water to my ingredients, and we're going to bind the two ingredients with water. You do not use warm water, you must use cold water from the tap, because you don't want to melt or destroy the structure of the fat that you've used. So I'm going to start adding a spoonful of water. I'm going to add about 2 tablespoons of water, and I'm going to just start working the the dough mixture, combining my ingredients together, and I'm going to try and form a dough with them. So as you can see, my mixture is still very dry, so I need to add another tablespoon of water. So I'm going to work on flour and butter and bind them together with water. Now what I like to do, I like to get my hands in quite early into pastry, because I always think you get better results by feeling how the moisture is being absorbed into the flour and the fat. So I know at the moment I need to add more moisture, and I can do a little test by popping a bit of dough onto my plate, and I'm just going to press it, and as you can see it's actually cracking, and that tells me the mixture is far too dry. So I'm going to pop that back in the bowl again, and I'm going to add another tablespoon, and I'm just going to combine them together again. I'm working my whole hand this time. I'm not just using my fingertips, but I'm using the whole of my hand, and especially my palm of my hand, to bring all the ingredients together into a dough. That actually feels quite a nice texture. I'm happy with the texture. So what to do next? I need to add a little bit of flour, just a sprinkling of flour onto my surface. Now I haven't got a shaker at the moment because I've got a different type of flour in there, and I don't want to change it at the moment. What I'm going to do, I could either sprinkle flour onto my board. If you think, oh, that's too sparse and spread out, sometimes it's just great just to get a little bit of flour in a sieve if you've got one at home, and then just sprinkle a little bit on the surface. I'm going to introduce my rolling pin now, and I'm going to make sure that I have just put some flour on the surface of my rolling pin. And now what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop my dough in the middle, and I'm going to start rolling. I've probably been slightly too generous with my flour there. What I'm going to do, I'm going to push down, and I'm going to work from the centre, and I'm going to push out. I'm going to turn my dough around, and I'm going to work my way from the centre to the edge, and I'm actually going to turn it over as well. It's not sticking, it's working quite nicely there. I'm pushing from the centre to try and create a nice even dough. Now you might like very thick dough, or you might prefer it very thin and crisp. Now the people that I'm making the little quiches for today, they like a thin dough. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you 2 methods so that you're aware of what you can do. I haven't greased my 12-hole baking tray at all today because of the fat content, which is half fat to flour. and there's enough flat in there so that when I ease my finished quiches later out of the tin, they're going to move out really easily. But what I'm going to do, I'm going to show you, if you want to make a thicker dough, the two ways you can do it. I'm going to pop my thicker dough into the pastry dish. It's really important that you get the right kind of cutter. You need to get a cutter that is larger than the hole, okay, because you need a depth. You've got to allow for the depth. Now I like my tarts this size, so I'm happy with the pastry cutter that I've used. If I was using a very thick pastry, what I would have to do is blind bake, and I would have to prick the bottom of my tarts. I'd pop some parchment paper on it, and I would then pop some beads on the top, little baking beads, and I would put that in the oven for 8 minutes just to cook. That's if I'm using a thick pastry, but today I'm going to use a thinner pastry. And for my little mini tarts, I won't have to do this. So I'm going to take that out, and I'm going to include that into my pastry, and I'm going to make them slightly thinner. Oops. So I'm going to cut my tarts out, and I'm going to pop them in to the tin. Doing them all roughly at the same time because I want that uniform thickness so that they are all the same thickness. So if you like thin pastry, you need to roll it just slightly thinner. Right, so I've just completed my pastry shapes. So I've cut my pastry, and I'm going to move on to the fillings for the next section. Right, well, I've spoken to my target group and I've asked them what fillings would they like in their mini quiches. So they've all agreed they'd like some ham, spring onions and pepper, and cheese as well. So what I've done, the ham, I removed any fat and I've just cut that in tiny cubes. The same with the spring onion and the pepper. Remember, you must wash your pepper before you chop, and remember to use the bridge and claw technique. And then I've just used a cheese grater for my cheese. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pop my ham in the bottom of each little tart, okay, and I'm going to add some pepper, and I'm going to pop in some spring onion, and I'm just going to work my way right the way around the tin and just make sure that it's roughly even. Right, so when you've popped all your ingredients into all of the little tarts, what we're going to do, we're going to just pop some cheese on the top, okay? Now there's lists of ideas of ingredients that you could put in your mini tarts, but remember, please have a chat with your target group, your families, and ask them what they would prefer, and actually what you have in the fridge as well. Okay, so there's a list of ideas. If you decide to put bacon in them, please make sure that you actually fry the bacon first. So a tiny little bit of oil in a frying pan, and just make sure that bacon is cooked before you put them into the little tarts. So there we are. But what we're going to do next is I'm just going to get myself organised, and we're going to go on to the next section, and we're going to make the milk and egg mixture, and we're going to pour that over the top, and I'm going to make sure my oven is preheated, ready to cook the tarts. So I'm going to make my egg and milk mix next. So I've got my 2 eggs, I've got some milk, and I've got salt and pepper for seasoning in a minute. And here's my equipment. I've got a jug, I've got a bowl, I'm going to be using a spoon and some form of mixing equipment. I'm going to show you how to use a balloon whisk. You could either use a fork or you can use an electric whisk. Okay, the first job I'm going to do is actually crack my egg. So I'm going to show you 2 ways that you can do it. The first way is using a palette knife, and I'm going to give the shell a sharp tap. I'm going to pop my thumbs either side of the shell, and I'm going to break it into the bowl. And I'm going to set that aside for compost later. Or, if you prefer, you can just tap the side of the bowl and you can crack the egg that way. If you do this way, can you see how the egg's shattered? And that means that some of the eggshell could end up in the bowl. So using the palette knife is a much cleaner way of cracking an egg. So there we are, I'm opening the egg and popping it into the bowl. And actually, if you look at the egg, this one's got the chalaise, which holds on both sides, which actually holds the egg, or the yolk of the egg, in suspension within the egg shell. So you can see that actually in the bowl. Right, what I'm going to do, I could beat with a fork. I could use a balloon whisk, or I could move on to my electric whisk. Now some of you might even have one of these, which is a little hand one, and you can actually spin that around. All of those will make a good job of combining your egg. And what I haven't done is added my milk. So for this, I'm using a dessert spoon. So I'm just going to line up your spoons so you can see the difference. This was a tablespoon I used earlier on when I was adding water to my fat and flour after I'd created my golden breadcrumbs for my pastry. But this time I'm going to use the dessert spoon. And if you look, it's the one that you probably use for your cornflakes in the morning, or if you have a pudding. So I'm going to add about 4 dessert spoons of milk, and I'm actually going to do this by eye. So I'm pouring in, this jug's not a great pourer, there we are, 3, 4, I'm going to put about 4 dessert spoons of milk, and then I'm going to pop my electric whisk on. Before I do this, if you're using one, please make sure you put the whisks into the bowl before you turn on your electric whisk. So I'm going to turn it on now. And I'm going to turn it off before I take it out of the bowl. Okay. Now at this point, you might want to season your tarts. So I've got salt. Now I know that the people that I'm making these for today, they don't like a lot of salt in their tarts because they feel the ham already adds that saltiness to it. So I know that they only want pepper in the tarts today. So I'm only going to put a couple of twists of pepper into the tarts, and then I'm just going to combine it. In fact, I'm going to combine it with a spoon so that the pepper is throughout the mixture. Now, to make it easy, I am going to pour my mixture into a measuring jug. And then I'm going to bring over my little tarts, and you can either spoon the mixture out, which means you are in control of how much is going into your tarts. If you feel more confident, you can just pour it out. But can you notice how the milk and the egg mixture is just coming over the edge? So do you know what? I'm going to use the spoon because I know it's going to be more accurate. And I know some of you like to be very clean when you're cooking. Right, so I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to make sure that the egg mixture is distributed evenly in every tart. So I'm aiming for at least 2 dessert spoons in every tart, and I've got a feeling I started from there. Right, I'm going to prepare my food so that it's ready to go in the oven. Now what I'm going to do now, I'm just going to go around and I'm just going to make sure that I haven't got milk and egg on the tray. So I'm just going around really quickly and I'm just wiping all the excess material, food, off the tray. There we go. So not only does it make it easier when you're washing up, but it keeps your tarts nice and neat, which is what you want. Remember, when you're going to the oven, I've preheated my oven to gas mark 5 to 6. I'm on 5 because my oven is quite a hot oven, and I'm going to be using my oven mitts. So I'm going to pop those on now, and I'm going to put them into the oven. Right, I'm just going to pop my trays of little quiches onto a cooling rack, and I'm just going to check they're cooked. So I've just come out the oven, I'm going to give it a little shake. If you notice, none of the liquid, milk and egg liquid, is moving, so that means that this is coagulated. So I'm going to just press on the top, and they feel absolutely fine, they feel firm. So I've given my little mini quiches time to cool off. So I'm going to use my palette knife now, and I'm just going to gently lift my little quiches out onto the cooling rack. But what I would like to do is just show you how the egg and milk liquid has coagulated. There we go. So if I cut through, you can actually see that the mixture has turned to a solid, so that's coagulation. And if you look at the golden brown pastry, that's happened by the process of dextrinization. And what's happened is the heat has reacted with the starch particles and turned them to a sugar called dextrin. Enjoy.